Hi guys! In today's video, we're going to be talking about the position of the lighter skinned black woman. I want to say I had this idea when I uploaded my first video about black women being accessories, and I think a couple of people commented that they'd like to see it, so here we are. I want to preface everything by emphasizing that I understand how significant colorism is in terms of black people's psyche and perception of themselves, as well as how we're received by the world. I would consider myself brown skinned, which means that I have not experienced colorism to the highest degree, and I don't want the video to be misinterpreted as me undermining the experiences of darker skinned black girls. If anything, I would love to discuss how colorism impacts darker skinned black girls, so if you have a video recommendation, please let me know. With this video, I just thought it'd be interesting to explore colorism from this angle. Whenever I think of it, as I'm sure many people do, they think of the unfair punishment it imposes onto darker skinned people. But rarely do we think about what it's like for the supposed preference and what this does to us as a community. So all that to say, as usual, my intent is to be inquisitive and start a conversation. Okay, honey. Colorism, lack of identity, and oversexualization are calling. Pick up the phone. For many light-skinned girls in the black community, being positioned as the preferred one can shape identity in ways that are both rewarding and limiting. From an early age, she might receive praise, attention, or desirability tied not to who she is, but to how she looks, specifically her skin tone and proximity to whiteness. Over time, this external reinforcement teaches her to rely on appearance as her primary source of validation. And this kind of conditional self-worth applies to pretty much anybody. I think of myself and my grades and how my main goal was always to be the best academically. It's what my mom prioritized and rewarded me for the most and what I was good at. Thus, looking back, having the newest shoes or being the flyest one in the room wasn't as important to me as long as the A's were coming in. I focused more on developing my academics because of the reward system at home. Anywho, being the pretty one can feel powerful in the moment, but it also subtly discourages her from cultivating other dimensions of herself, such as intellectual curiosity, creative ambition, or emotional depth, because those qualities are rarely acknowledged or rewarded to the same extent. As a result, her sense of self may become one-dimensional, tethered to a fragile currency that depends on how others perceive her rather than on an inner foundation of self-worth. Internally, this can produce tension. She might feel both affirmed by her beauty and constrained by it, sensing that people engage with her surface but overlook her substance. And this reliance on external validation can make her identity feel shaky because beauty and desirability are unstable sources of worth, subject to aging, shifting trends, or environments where her light skin is no longer a privilege. The paradox is that while colorism grants her certain advantages, it can also rob her of the opportunity to expand herself, leaving her identity underdeveloped and her self-esteem vulnerable when the external world no longer affirms her in the same way. Outside of colorism impacting the light-skinned girl internally, it also influences how she's perceived in the world, especially within her own community. Although the light-skinned girl is the preference, she's still a woman, which means she's still subject to objectification and misogyny. In black film and television, the light-skinned girl is often the love interest, and this translates to other forms of media like music videos where her being put on a pedestal intersects with hypersexuality. In black media, especially hip-hop and R&B music videos, light-skinned women are often hypersexualized in ways that turn them into symbols rather than individuals. They are framed through close-ups of their bodies, placed in revealing clothing, and positioned as objects of desire whose main role is to enhance the male artist's status or fantasy. Within this framework, light-skinned women become the shorthand for sexy and ideal, reinforcing both colorist hierarchies and narrow ideas of womanhood. Over time, this repeated imagery sends a message not only to audiences, but also to the women themselves. Their social value lies in how well they embody this hypersexual role. For many light-skinned girls who grow up seeing women who look like them consistently cast as video vixens, love interests, or sexual trophies, it can create pressure to perform that identity in real life. Hypersexuality becomes not just something projected onto them, but something they may internalize as their main source of power, validation, or visibility. For me, I think of Giselle from Housewives of Potomac. And forgive me for always referencing Housewives, but I'm a Housewives girly, okay? Especially Atlanta and Potomac. And honestly, I think there are many lessons on society and psychology to be taken from Housewives, so maybe I should look into doing a video centered around that. But back to Giselle. When I think of a light skinned woman obsessed with her looks above all else, I think of Giselle. A clear example of this dynamic appeared during a reunion when Wendy critiqued Giselle's fashion sense by saying something along the lines of, well, Giselle is a pretty girl, and pretty girls don't have to have great style. And all Giselle heard was, oh, you think I'm pretty? Oh, okay. In that moment, Wendy indirectly highlighted something central to Giselle's identity. She leans so heavily on her attractiveness that she doesn't feel the need to develop other aspects of herself, such as her fashion sense or even her conversational sharpness. This pattern shows up repeatedly, especially in confessionals where Giselle often references her looks or sexual desirability as though those qualities alone define her. Over time, it begins to feel like she overcompensates with her beauty, where she lacks depth or quick wit, especially in verbal sparring with the other women. Even if she loses an argument, in her mind, she still wins because she believes she looks better. So her sense of worth, and by extension her identity, seems anchored in the validation she's always received for her appearance. Besides Giselle, I think of other light-skinned women who, while undeniably beautiful, appear reluctant to develop beyond that beauty, to the point that they can read as one-dimensional or even airheaded. And this isn't meant as disrespect, but as an observation of how prioritizing beauty, which can be a tool, but when put above all else, can limit the expression of a fuller, more complex self. Speaking of being praised, let's talk about how colorism influences the way people, especially black men, treat the lighter-skinned black woman. You see, colorism and hypersexuality in the media shape the treatment of light-skinned women in very specific and often contradictory ways. For many black men, the way they treat the light-skinned woman is shaped by how colorism and hypersexuality are reinforced in the media. Music videos, films, and pop culture often frame the light-skinned woman as the prize, the one who validates a man's success, wealth, or masculinity. This creates a dynamic where many men approach light-skinned women with heightened desire, not always out of genuine interest in them as people, but because being with them signifies status. In this sense, the woman becomes less of a partner and more of a trophy, a visual confirmation of his desirability and social capital. The hypersexualization of light-skinned women also encourages some men to project fantasies onto them, treating them as inherently more sensual or sexually available. And this can lead to objectifying behaviors where men feel entitled to their attention or bodies, assuming that desirability is the role they are meant to play. On the surface, this might look like privilege, constant affirmation, attention, and preference, but it can also feel dehumanizing because the interest is shallow and conditional. Many light-skinned women find themselves desired but not respected, pursued but not valued beyond physical appearance. There's also a psychological undercurrent for men themselves. By internalizing these colorist hierarchies, they may overestimate the value of proximity to light skin, equating it with beauty, refinement, or even upward mobility. In practice, this means they may dismiss or overlook darker-skinned women while elevating light-skinned women to pedestal status, reinforcing division within the community. For the light-skinned woman, this dynamic is double-edged. She is constantly affirmed, but also constantly reduced, caught in a cycle where men's treatment of her is filtered through a colorist and hypersexual gaze that prioritizes how she looks over who she is. The treatment of lighter-skinned black women by other black women is often more complex, layered with both solidarity and tension. Because colorism has historically privileged lighter skin within a racist society, many darker-skinned women recognize that light-skinned girls are often granted beauty, desirability, and attention with less effort. This can lead to feelings of resentment, competition, or distance, not necessarily because of the women themselves, but because of what their presence represents within a colorist hierarchy. In some cases, light-skinned women may be perceived as the pretty one or the chosen one, creating friction in female friendships or social circles, where others feel overlooked or undervalued in comparison. The hypersexualization of the lighter-skinned black woman only adds another layer. A number of women may police or criticize light-skinned girls for leaning into this hypersexual image, even when some are simply responding to the roles and validation society has offered them. For the light skinned woman herself, this dynamic can feel deeply isolating. Once again, she is both elevated and targeted, admired for her looks, yet also distrusted, envied, or accused of being shallow and overly reliant on beauty. And to be clear, there are definitely light skinned girls who lean into their privilege and treat darker skinned women poorly because of it. I don't mean to deny or dismiss that experience and the damages it causes. But the duality here is important. Many times, the lighter skinned girl is targeted not for her actions, but for the way she is perceived within a colorist framework. I'm not sure if this is the best example, but I think of the way Kelly Price treated Shantae Moore on R&B Divas LA. While I've never seen full episodes, just clips on social media, you can see that Kelly was very mean and rough in tone to Shantae, despite Shantae doing her best to make the situation work. I've done some research and saw that Kelly went as far as to request not to have to film with Shantae and wouldn't even speak to her at their reunion. Although both women are undeniably beautiful and talented, Kelly seemed to treat Shantae differently, projecting certain expectations onto her because of her lighter skin. It was almost as if she assumed Shantae would be arrogant or unkind, or perhaps she felt her own insecurities triggered by Shantae's looks. At times, it came across as Kelly acting out and making Shantae pay for being the preference, even though that's not Shantae's fault. And she consistently came across as genuinely sweet. Again, this is from what I've seen, and I know Kelly was nasty to a number of people, so if you've seen the show, tell me what you guys think down below. But these kind of interactions are what make this dynamic especially complicated. The identity often isn't one the light-skinned girl actively chooses. It's shaped for her through the constant reinforcement of colorism and media imagery. Still, the perception among other women is often that she benefits without actually acknowledging the cost. This creates a complicated social environment where colorism positions light-skinned girls as both beneficiaries and victims of a system that ultimately harms everyone, just in different ways. So, overall, colorism fractures the collective image of the Black community. Instead of being united against systemic racism and external oppression, energy is often redirected toward internal policing, resentment, or competition. In this way, colorism doesn't just harm individuals, it weakens the community's ability to present a united front, while perpetuating the very Eurocentric beauty standards and racial hierarchies that were designed to divide in the first place. Furthermore, when the media consistently privileges light-skinned women as hypersexualized or exotic objects of desire, it reduces the complexity of Black femininity and transmits a distorted image of Black womanhood to wider audiences. This spills over into real-life treatment, affecting opportunities in relationships and social mobility. Well, that's all for today. Let me know what part of the video was most interesting or noticeable to you. What point did you think of that I didn't mention or could have explained more? Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!